Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session on modeling new modes and concepts, covering everything from air taxis to Hyperloop, car-free cities, and how we model the future. I'm Bruce Mori from IBI Group, and I'll be the chair. I'm sure you'll find this to be a fascinating topic as new technologies and services are rapidly changing the transportation landscape and will likely have some pretty large disruptive impacts. These technologies can bring some tremendous benefits, but also some negative impacts. So modeling tools will be critically important in helping to plan our cities to best leverage the coming of these new technologies. To shed some light on this, we have three great presentations on the latest developments in the Middle East. Before we get going, some hop-on business to cover. I'm sure you'll have many questions, so please look to the conference tab on the right of your screen and enter any questions under the Q&A tab. After our speakers have done their presentations, we'll have a question and answer period with our panel. Also, there's a chat box to share comments amongst yourselves. With that, our first speaker is Paul Speirs, and he'll be presenting on vision-led scenario-based modeling for smart cities. Paul's an independent transport modeler with 27 years experience delivering projects the world over. Prior to becoming independent, Paul led PTV's global pre-sales team at the pioneering end of PTV's modeling solutions, particularly in the field of shared mobility, electric mobility, urban logistics, and real-time traffic management. Paul's practical experience and influence has helped shape PTV's product portfolio, delivering proof of concept and projects in Japan, North and South America, the Middle East, and across Europe. And I'll pass it over to you, Paul.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Bruce. I got a bit of an echo there, so I hope you're not getting an echo when I'm talking. I must apologize. I'm getting some really bad feedback. I don't know what to do about it.
Paul, if you have any other tabs open, please close them.
That looks good.
Okay, you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm getting a delay in what I'm saying. About 5 seconds after I say it, I hear me say it again. Do you hear me twice?
You're coming in fine from my end, Paul.
Paul, you might have two tabs open.
Yeah, I don't have two tabs open.
Okay, Paul, can we move on to the next speaker and we'll sort this audio problem out?
Yeah, I think that's the best way, because otherwise I'm just going to hear myself echo.
Okay, so let's go on to our next presentation. We have Dr. Petr Senk and Boleslav Sivkov from PTV, and they'll be presenting on modeling new concepts and technologies on air mobility. Dr. Petr Senk brings strong theoretical background in transport modeling, gathered during 4 years of research at the prestigious Kyoto University. That's been complemented with 12 years of consulting experience in demand forecasting, edit preference, real preference survey designs, freight modeling, and traffic simulations. Boleslav Sivkov is the principal solutions architect for modeling at PTV Group and is responsible for technical business development and innovation in the Middle East, India, and Africa. He has successfully completed prestigious projects in the GCC, India, and Africa by strategizing transport modeling plans to solve issues of traffic congestion and management. So over to you, Peter and Boleslav.
Hello, everyone. I will just reconfirm that you can see the first slide of the presentation.
Yes, we can.
Great. So in such case, it's my great pleasure to provide you with the insight together with my colleague Boleslav Sivkov into projects that we worked on recently. And unfortunately, it won't be the real results because as all these new technology projects are very often under strict NDAs, what we can share are the challenges that we faced in these projects and the solutions that we applied to overcome these challenges. So I will move to the first slide on the overview of the challenges. So my topics that I dealt with was the air taxi services. Recently about 3 projects for 3 different cities that we implemented or implementing, and my colleague will talk about the Hyperloop in more details. Some of the challenges are shared among these 2 new modes. Some of them are specific. For air taxi, we will focus, or I will focus on the question how to localize, how to locate hubs to maximize profit. So the optimization task and the challenge related to this optimization. Then the second is how to model air taxi as an on-demand service. One of the shared topics will be how to integrate the intermodal air taxi option into mode choice. So how to model the air taxi or on-demand air taxi service as an intermodal service connected to other modes, to the feeder modes. And the last one I will focus on is how to implement or how to integrate the key competitive advantage of air taxi, what's the travel time reliability, into mode choice and estimation of demand. So let's have a look at the first challenge, hub location optimization. Clients very often come with, they call it, I have just very simple question. And the simple question is, where should we locate our hubs to maximize profit? Yeah, the question is simple. The answer, not that simple, because to optimize the hub locations, we need to know the spatial and temporal distribution of demand and costs related to serving the demand. But to know the demand, we need to know what is the air taxi level of service. That's clear. And to know the air taxi level of service, we need to know where the hubs are located. So what's happening? We have a loop where the hub location depends on the demand and the demand depends on the hub locations. So the simple question is actually so-called B-level optimization problem that is not easy to solve with standard linear or non-linear programming methods. And we had to come up with a solution to solve these this type of questions. The solution that we have successfully implemented is based on a genetic algorithm. Unfortunately, I cannot go too much into details because of the time constraint, but at least I would like to provide you with a hint on why is the best solution. This one is quite effectively searching, because this algorithm that is based on the Darwin's theory of natural evolution, quite effectively search for the space of possible combination of hub locations and systematically combines them. So in the search for the best performing hub location, and the performance can be measured by different model KPIs. It can be the total demand, it can be the revenue, or it can be even a profit. Only an overview of the key terms that are used. I think instead of going to detail, is I will show how let's say the modeling is a part of this optimization loop. So the loop itself, let's say the genetic algorithm, to find the quite well-performing solution. I wouldn't call it the best because we are very often in some local optima, but results suggest that the local optima is hard to beat by any manual search or any other search that we tried. And the key component here is the calculation of fitness, meaning for each combination of hub. So in this loop, we have about, in each generation, we have about 40 to 50 different combination of hubs. This is the population. Then we have to assess for each combination what is the fitness, meaning the profit or the demand, and then start to systematically combine these into new generations. So in the result, we have several hundreds or thousands of model runs to complete one scenario. The model run is quite straightforward. So we need the transport supply model, we need the travel demand model, including the new mode implemented, to calculate the air taxi flows. Once we know the air taxi flow, we need to calculate the optimal use of fleet. And once we know the optimal fleet use, we can calculate the KPI, for example, profit, because we know the costs, we know the revenue, we can calculate profit and feed it back to the genetic algorithm for the concrete combination of hub. So that's the framework of the solution that proved to be quite efficient or quite worked very well and provided us with satisfying results. The second challenge that we face in the air taxi projects is the spatial and temporal distribution of trip requests, because on-demand service is specific that the supply is not plannable. It reacts to the demand that can be on each day distributed in different way in terms of space and in terms of time. So in such case, the solution that we use is a PTV Visum mass modeler that has a function of generating trip requests. So as we can see, there are different attributes. We can generate trip requests for a certain time period. We can define how big the group should be and what is the distribution of number of passengers in each group. We can also define the pre-booking time and also where the demand appears in a spatial sense, meaning the nodes in which the demand appears, not only zone but the concrete nodes. It goes to more detailed compared to zone level planning. What is important here is the random seed that we can generate, for example, 100 simulations with random seeds from 1 to 100, and then we will have 100 different results that we can aggregate to a summary, meaning for each model run, for each simulation, we can have slightly different values of the KPIs that can be later averaged in scheme matrices. The advantage here that the random seed for model setup, for random seed number 1, I will always receive the same outputs. So it's like pseudo-random. But for random seed 2, I have different outputs and so on. So the results are also replicable if we want to test some scenarios, for example, or some So that's the on-demand service. The second challenge related to on-demand service is the fleet use optimization. For this, we are using the PTV Visum tour planning, where these trip requests that are generated, so we know when the trip request was booked, what is the desired travel time from where to where the passenger wants to travel. And there is so-called tour planning procedure that is inspired or together with our colleagues from logistics. We are applying this methodology to optimize the fleet use to minimize the costs of serving the demand by optimization of the fleet use. In the results, we receive, we can calculate also a wide set of cost-related KPIs as journey time, or everything at the origin destination level, so we can calculate the scheme matrices and use it in demand modeling. Another challenge is the battery charging, especially for vehicles where we don't have the swapping technology. Here, again, in the tour planning procedure, we can define where are the charging areas located. what is the maximum range of vehicle to operate on with one sorry for one charging, what is the charging time, and then the charging times and the movement of vehicles for to charging areas are integrated into the optimization of the fleet use. Then when we move from the on-demand modeling to the travel time reliability, travel time reliability is one of the key competitive advantage of air taxi, and it should be included in demand model. It can be understood as a willingness to pay for, let's say, a timely arrival by the given mode, and the solution that proved to be working pretty well was based on literature that we very often know the value of time, and we have there's quite advanced literature or literature on value of travel time reliability that can be derived from the value of time using so-called reliability ratio. So from a study that has a meta-analysis of other studies that deal with the topic of reliability, we have good experience in using the difference between the 90s and 50s percentiles, which is also quite interpretable to the client, saying on how many percent of trips I can be sure that I arrive on time or within the time interval that I have as a safety margin. And we also have a data, the floating car data, that we are in close collaboration with a provider of a floating car data at the worldwide level. So we even know the information on the travel time reliability, the measured. And using the reliability ratio, we can include it in the utility functions. So for example, I'm adding one generic structure of utility function where we have the value of travel time as a parameter linked to the travel time, and value of travel time saving multiplied by the reliability ratio to get the value of travel time reliability together with the reliability component. Intermodality is the intersecting topic with the Hyperloop, where my colleague Boleslav will overtake. But only for information, also in the air taxi mode, we are used to use, or we have good experience with using the multimodal assignment procedure to model intermodal trips where the passenger searches for the shortest path from origin to destination using two or more different modes, where one of the modes is obligatory. In our case, is the flying mode from this zone, from this hub to another hub, and the feeder mode. Generalized costs on each leg are included to search the shortest path in terms of the total generalized costs. There is an example of implementation, and my colleague will tell a bit more because he has very similar implementation on the example of the Hyperloop. So Boleslav, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Petr. Actually, the intermodality is not the only topic that is intersecting between Hyperloop and air taxi. It's also about the on-demand service. But let's keep it to the next slides, because what I would like to highlight first, if we know that air taxi is something similar to a helicopter, but just in a different environment, maybe battery charged and so on and so forth. This is what we know from the history, and this mode is quite well defined. With Hyperloop, it is different. This is a completely new idea that is now on the peak of investigation. This idea came up to Elon Musk several years ago, and it's nothing else than just a combination between pneumatic pipes and the magnetic levitation technology, which is able to develop very high speeds, which are higher than passenger aviation. And the technology claims that it is 100% energy efficient, it is 100% green, and so on and so forth. I will not go too much in detail. You can read about it either in the original paper by Elon Musk or find some information about it. Many modelers are now working on Hyperloop, and we are not the exception. So I wanted to summarize for you certain use cases that we came across for Hyperloop, which are shown on the next slide. Petr, if you can just skip to that one. Yeah, thank you very much. Many questions arise with Hyperloop, and it's very important to put it into the right place in terms of usability and in terms of competition. You can see here I put several questions that position Hyperloop in different segments of the mobility market, starting from the urban mobility and innovative regional long-distance commuting and up to a very long distance trips, shaping the Hyperloop system to a countrywide metro, for example, and certain cargo use cases. So all these things, first you need to decide what exactly you are planning to model here, and according to that, the model will take a shape and the architecture will become clear. But in general, the setup would be quite similar for all of these use cases. I would say the only difference will be the reference points and maybe level of detail. So let's have a look how to set up actually the model, which includes Hyperloop, and this can be either an add-on to your existing models, or it can be a brand new mode choice model, which works with the results of a trip distribution of existing model, let's say. What is very important while setting up a model of such mode as Hyperloop is to consider a detailed scheme calculation due to the very high speed, very high cruising speed, meaning that this advantage has to be preserved in the competition between the modes. So any extra penalties on the costs or in time for accessing and ingressing from this mode, they really matter. That is why it is recommended to apply a multimodal assignment procedure for modeling Hyperloop, and actually it works in the following way. In terms of implementation, there are several steps. First step uses the dummy demand matrix, which is in fact representing a supply mask to come up with the schemes, multimodal schemes, where Hyperloop is a main mode, and there are several subordinate modes that can play a role of an access egress modes. Calculation of the multimodal assignment produces path sequences, and based on those path sequences, you can come up with a combined scheme for the sequence of modes, which later can be converted into the utility functions and fed into the mode choice itself. After the mode choice procedure, it is possible to reproduce the path sequences by just rerunning the multimodal assignment. However, using the actual demand by Hyperloop, which was produced by the mode choice procedure. And further, these path sequences can be disaggregated into specific model matrices, and they can be either assigned all of them on the network, or you can do separate assignment only for the main mode or for the subordinate modes. The next important aspect of Hyperloop modeling is how to actually consider fares. And the key message here is that actually, Hyperloop is one of the technologies that is immature right now, meaning that any kind of attempt to approach a Hyperloop supplier or any person who is planning to do an estimation of the fares, you will end up with a situation where fares will be calculated based on the cost of the system, and costs will be today costs. And to identify what's the level of costs when the technology will mature is very hard. That is why we are in certain cases utilizing such techniques that allow us to put Hyperloop in competition with existing modes. And you see the example here, which is a fair model which works considering the surcharge on top of the closest on top of the fare of the closest mode in competition, which in fact represents an extra charge for the time saving. Effectively, this example adds on top of airfare 50% of the time saved in monetary representation. And on the concluding slide, I just wanted to show you the result, an example result sensitivity test for the fare model of Hyperloop. And this example is presenting a use case of an intercity connection, more or less typical intercity connection for the short haul aviation, where the trip length is in the range of 800 to, I don't know, maybe 1,200 kilometers. And the red mode is actually the Hyperloop mode, presenting various shares given a relative variation in the fare. Effectively, similar sensitivity can be performed for the other use cases using other reference modes. Let's say if we're talking about competition on a long distance commute, or a bit shorter distances. In such cases, reference mode can be either rail or even car. Once again, to mention is that actually the approach of considering time savings in fare modeling for Hyperloop allows us to avoid using actual costs that can be estimated based on the current knowledge of the technology, but it allows us to immediately put it into competition with other modes and see how the system will actually behave. On this, I would like to conclude, and thank you very much for your attention. Bruce, now back to you.
Hey, thank you, Peter and Boleslav, and nice presentation. And I look forward to the day that I don't have to worry about street congestion and traffic lights. So I believe, one other note, if you have any questions, please don't forget to put it in the conference room Q&A, and we'll do our best to cover them at the end of the presentation. So Paul, I believe you're ready, and over to you.
Yeah, I fixed my microphone problems, hopefully. So let's share this. Great. Okay. So we're ready to go. Yeah, hello and welcome. Vision-led scenario-based modeling for smart cities of the future. It's a big title. I'm Paul Speirs, and I've spent the last 18 months working on the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia, mostly with PTV, but more recently as an independent modeler, as I no longer work directly for PTV. So let's get straight to it. So here's the running order. I'll sprint through this in the next 15 minutes. I'm going to introduce you to the concepts of the NEOM line and how we are approaching forecasting the future, and how this perhaps is against the grain of more traditional modeling of established cities and places. I've also got a couple examples of other master plans I've worked on before we close out with some thoughts. So introducing the line. I don't know if you've heard of NEOM and the line. If you go to neom.com, you'll see lots of stuff about the NEOM project, not just mobility, but all of the other things that they need to consider when you build a new city. So NEOM, a vision for the future. I want you to imagine a city in the future where all your mobility needs are taken care of you will not own or need a car. You will have access to electric modes, scooters, bikes. You can walk to your nearest Hyperloop port. You just heard about Hyperloop. You can catch an on-demand autonomous electric vehicle to take you to your nearest air mobility port, fly off into the Neom Mountains or the coastal resorts. It's a futuristic concept for sure. Neom itself will be a city of about 1 million people, literally built out of the desert. Its vision statement is bold. Its project ethos is all about sustainability and placemaking that enhances lifestyle. As I said, do check out their website. Neom, as you can imagine, is a bold project, and it comes with bold, powerful statements. The crux of the vision from a mobility perspective is the creation of a totally walkable city where everything you need is on your doorstep. And this, the vision believes, will enhance the area as a place of innovation for global businesses, new and old, to come together and to accelerate human progress. Neom itself is situated on the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia. It's just across from the Red Sea from Egypt and just south of Israel and Jordan. It's hard to reach today, but a new international airport will open the doors to the rest of the world. On a global level, you could argue it's quite central. There are some eye-catching headlines about the vision, including the maximum 20-minute commute. Now, this line is 170 kilometers long. It's not very wide, but just think about that, 20 minutes. That's to say you can get from anywhere to anywhere on the line within 20 minutes. This is a performance criteria that the project is keeping in mind. Now, of course, we know that mobility intertwines with other topics, and its success will be measured in how everything is integrated. I would say the vision calls for a truly smart city of the future. So how do we control that future? How do we forecast that future? So this is the line. This is how it's going to operate. This is a cross-section image you see here. It's 170 kilometers long, not very wide. All of the motorized movement will be lateral along the line, running east-west. In the west, on the coast of the Gulf of Aqaba, and going east 170 kilometers through some mountains up onto a high valley plateau. The concept really is to hide the services beneath the living and pedestrian area. So we've got the service layer where the logistics will move around, and then we've got the spine layer, which, as you can see on this image, we've got the ultra high speed transit. So this is where the mass transit will occur. There will be ground transportation. You can imagine perhaps the on-demand transit and the e-scooters and so on above ground. Beneath ground, that high speed to achieve that 20-minute commute could be something like Hyperloop or maglev or a bullet train. Is going to be high tech to achieve that vision. So how do you begin to even model a new city and create the forecasts and projections when you're really starting from a blank canvas? And you're trying to model it so that it maps the vision of the mobility and lifestyle of Neom itself. So I've got a little graph here, and I've segmented it into 4 possible futures, pitching technology choices against investment. Now, let's take a look at these. We've got the probable future where we don't really invest much in technology, and you just get kind of like what you've always got. It's a safe way. I guess it's the way most of the world is these days. Then you've got the painful future where you choose the wrong technology and you overinvest in it and it doesn't work. We don't want to go down that road. And then the two that we do want to aim for are the possible future where you pick the right investment and right technology, and also the plausible one. And I say plausible, this is, you know, a hoverboard is plausible, but probably not likely. So, you know, that's what might sit in there. Hyperloop, you could argue, is plausible. Is it possible? And I think if we were to pitch NEOM somewhere in this future, it's on the cusp of plausible, definitely stretching possible to its limits. So this approach, it's an outcome-driven future, and it's called backcasting. So backcasting is not really concerned with predicting the future. It's a topic I've been beating a drum about for the last 10 years. It's really taking ownership of the future. And I think if you consider critical uncertainties, which is a relationship one does not know how to develop, in our case, human behavior, and the pandemic has shown how different things can be and how we have adapted to those things. And I guess the same goes for new mobility. We don't really know how we're going to embrace certain aspects of it, or whether some of it will reach technical maturity expectations. But backcasting is a way of taking control of that future and in a way controlling that destiny. And there it is. There's my little sketch I made 10 years ago of how that might work. Now, when we consider how we currently model cities and regions, and how we need to model with respect to backcasting, well, I think the landscape is changing a little bit. Let me just explain. So here you see some usual variables that we throw into a transport model, and these ones in particular, often we fix these in our base year, and then they stay that way into our forecast, and we generally don't look at them again. Certainly in the last year, some of those variables have changed, and they will change in the future. And you know, instantly this makes your modeling more complex when you have to consider these variables. Add in the variables of the project itself. How is the land use going to be spread along this line? What transport systems really are going to come to the fore and be useful in delivering the vision? These are variables, and this is how a transport model works. You know this. You combine all of these variables together, and they start to produce your travel patterns, which in turn make the projections that feed the performance indicators that define the success of your city that you're building, in our case. But with so many variables and so many combinations, which future is right? It's a difficult one to know, isn't it? So if you can just consider that you need to vary these variables, you need to create combinations, different combinations of these variables, it can project many different futures. And if you choose the right KPIs to measure these against, then you can start to plot out which of these futures start to conform to the vision that you're after. And these KPIs, you know, they could be the minimum travel time, they could be trip length distribution related, or mode share, or mobility asset requirements, for instance. How much of a particular vehicle type do I need? You know, there's a CapEx and an OpEx to consider there. And if you get those right, and you should do, because you should have performance indicators to match the vision that you're projecting for, then you can start to settle down some of these variables in a good way. It does, and I'll leave this question with you, it does beg the question, should we simulate, I've said everything, but which should we simulate more, just to be sure of the confidence we take in the projections that we make. So throwing all of this into the mix, there's an awful lot that we need to consider when creating a model for a new city. We've got the vision, we've got the modeling variables, We've got the complexity of the new mobility modes. You just saw something on Hyperloop that the next talk, I'm sure, is going to enlighten us on how to model some of these things. You've got these interactions all coming together, and you really need a framework to hang these things on. And just by way of illustration, here is a little framework here, and I've just got some headers down the left-hand side, and you've got visionaries and proven sides to this balancing act. The visionaries, the visions coming from the master planners and the urban design team, and then you've got your engineers who kind of challenge that and say, you know, your scientists, and saying you can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. And you've got to find the balance. And this is what I mean by setting up the KPIs in a good way. And if you do that, you can start to find the balance of where the optimal range is that provides the confidence for you to put the right structure in your model and the right content inside your model. That's kind of NEOM. I don't really want to go into the detail of NEOM itself, in how we're doing it, but that's like an overview. Now, it's quite complex, as you can imagine, and often in these large projects, decisions need to be made before your model is ready, and the inputs you need have not been defined yet. So you've got a chicken and egg thing going on here, and so how do you even kind of begin? And so you do need to keep it simple in the early stages of this process. And I've got two examples here of keeping it simple. This is a master plan. I'm not going to tell you where it is. I worked on this about 12 years ago. It had good points and bad points, which is why I don't want to tell you the name. And I've got a guest, if you can hear, apologies. So in this master plan, we've got 1 million people living here, and originally it was defined by a boulevard running through the city, 14-lane boulevard. Can you imagine that? So we work with the master planners to break this boulevard down, break it down from roads and turn it into streets. And through this section here, these colors depict the hierarchy of the network, how important different streets are relative to each other. And we created streets in parallel here, all with an equal weighting, equal importance, equal opportunity for vibrancy and vitality and placemaking and living and all that sort of stuff. And using this technique, we were able to demonstrate that and get rid of this boulevard. On the downside, and this image on the right depicts this. This is showing how the neighborhoods could develop, and we're looking at them as like a heat map of activity, intensity of activity. And we've got a few hotspots here that you can see, which is showing, you know, good, strong neighborhoods. But I just want to draw on one in particular. Now, this community here, I think there are about 80,000 people going to live here, and the network hierarchy is very cold. And I think really its chances of success could be better designed for the people who might live in this place. The streets aren't very well connected, and if you don't have well connected streets, you don't create that sense of place, that urban village that you're after. The second case study I have, this was one I did about 7 or 8 years ago in Africa. And again, we use this network hierarchy technique where we define the network by the strength of the links. And importance does not equate to volume. You know, a motorway is not an important link. You know, an important link for livability is places that can create friction through the corridor. And when I say friction, I'm talking about the meeting of people in trade and retail and that kind of things. Old cities from centuries ago that have evolved organically. You know, humans are very good at evolving cities over time, and that's why we've got high streets in all of our UK towns. They are the centre of the place. It's where retail and trade happens, and this is what we're trying to do with these designs: is try and create that high street feel with a master plan that you don't really know is how it's going to behave. And so what we did here is on the existing network, you can see there's a big gap here edging into the jungles of Gabon. Here is a master plan on the right. There's about 200,000 people from memory going to live here. And what we did, and we played around with lots of scenarios to depict the quality of the streets in the network and its connectivity, and it's shown better in the image with the black background, and you can see 3 or 4 streets in parallel with a kind of equal place in the hierarchy, which means that these streets, they're not competing with each other, they're working together. Each of them will have the same opportunity for that vibrancy and neighborhood creation that you're looking for. One last thing I want to say on this example is it takes several years to build up these developments, and you wonder if the master plan will go astray as different developers come online and build it to what they think needs to be done. And one thought process here is very early on in the program, you can start to lay your utilities down along these primary streets early on, and then when the developers come along, they will plug into those streets. You know, where's the power? Where's the water? Where are my other utilities? Oh, there they are. Let's plug into those. And so you can create that blueprint, that framework for success, you know, many years before you actually start building the thing itself. So I just want to close out now with some thoughts of the last 10-15 minutes. So, you know, I might read this verbatim. Cities of the future, they do provide that blank canvas to fulfill the vision and ambition. And certainly for NEOM, the vision is very clear. And it's beholden on all of us working on the project to try and deliver on that vision. And with that in mind, our forecasts need to be outcome driven. We're not in the game of predicting and providing. We're in the game of trying to see what we can see how we can reach that vision with that backcasting technique I talked about. A debate that I've had over the years, I'm sure lots of us have had, is the chicken and egg one about land use, function and form, and the mobility system. Which comes first? Well, in this project, the debate is very much alive, and the land use and population distribution along the line is being juggled and tested and challenged to see how the mobility can fit it, and vice versa as well. You know, if we create a system where 50% of the population want to travel on Hyperloop up and down the line, then we haven't got the land use balance right, for sure. So that then you go back a few steps and you try again. And that's what I mean about creating these scenarios and these KPIs to help measure the success and the direction that we're going in. Those 2 examples of simplicity at the very beginning, they can just give you that little head start without having to worry about creating that complex model. Incidentally, if you're interested to know more about that network hierarchy examples that I gave and how that's done, you can reach me through LinkedIn and the usual channels. Last thing to say, that humans and society, we are self-calibrating. The last year in the pandemic has shown that we can change, we can adapt, and we do it en masse. We just need that little steer in the right direction, and I'll leave that thought with you and say thank you for watching and listening.
Thank you very much, Paul, and very interesting planning with a blank slate. And thank you for putting some structure to what seems like a mind-blowing different possibilities. And again, if you have any questions, please enter it into the conference room Q&A. So we'll move on to our final presentation, and we have Vorraa and Guglielmo from Citilabs Middle East Consultancy. And their presentation is on addressing new technologies and services within a strategic transportation model. Introducing Tor, he's been involved with transport modeling all over the world for several decades. He's Citilabs and now Bentley's representative in the Middle East, and is involved in the development and enhancements of the Abu Dhabi STEAM model. He has an in-depth understanding of commonly used and emerging modeling processes and how they are implemented in the Cube software. Guglielmo is a transportation modeler and a GIS expert, and has been involved with development and enhancements of several simulation models in many parts of the world. His experience goes from assignment models to complex multimodal models, from urban scale to national scale, and is experienced in land use transport integrated modeling. So please take it away, Ettore and Guglielmo.
Thank you, Bruce. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. We are going to talk about adding new technologies and services to a strategic model in Cube. And the example is the Abu Dhabi STEAM model, which was presented earlier today by Stephen Bennett. We have been talking a lot about activity-based models lately, and especially for new technologies and services, that seems to be the future. But for most of cities around the world, we still have the 4-stage model as a platform, and it's essential that we can add these new technologies and services also to these. And this is the presentation that we are giving. Cube has been used a lot for AVMs around the world, but this is about strategic modeling. Next, please. To kick it off, we will explain what we have implemented in the Abu Dhabi STEAM model. And before we start, I don't talk much about about the Hyperloop, because that has been modeled with STEAM already for years, a few years ago actually. We see that as a public transport line with some additional functionality, and that works in the STEAM model already. What we are going to talk about is new techs and services that we have implemented in the mode choice model. We have implemented AVs privately owned. This will be based on adoption rate by population segments. We have implemented various forms of MaaS, motorized mobility as a service, a conventional taxi, new taxi forms, and even others such as heli-taxi can be modeled. We have implemented new soft modes, e-micromobility, e-bikes and e-scooters, either owned or rented. Next, please. For the new tech, the private, it's about ownership and adoption. To what extent will we actually have AVs when we can't drive them ourselves? Why should we have them? So it might well be in the future that these are being more and more used for mobility as a service, but there will be autonomous vehicles run privately. When we do that, we need a model that can model the return trips or what happens after people have reached their destination. So will the AV go back to its origin to do other things, to just park at the origin, or will it go to a parking place, or perhaps even join a fleet? This might increase vehicle kilometers, and we need to be aware of this. We can also test, level of connectivity and what that does for capacity on the road network and its efficiency. We can obviously test using corridors and lanes for AVs only and see how that works. E-micromobility, owned privately, that will reduce motorized trips, motorized short trips, but how much? We can check out how bike and scooter lanes will work, and even parking facilities for these owned micromobility stations and the destinations. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah, the demand responsive modes. This is about fleets. What kind of fleets do we need to match the demand? What is the availability? For MaaS, we have a model. We need a model that can test the fleet sizes and the resulting wait times. How long do we need to wait for or walk to a service such as an e-scooter to find it and to use it? And how long do we need to wait for the taxi services? We need to find a balance between conventional and new taxi forms. We need to be able to test fare structures and the competition between the various forms of demand responsive modes. We need to test the efficiency of the fleet and its operation. We need to find fleet sizes that can match the demand. This needs to be done in the model. And even use of AVs in fleets. For e-micromobility, as for the owned e-micromobility, we need to be able to test how bikes and scooter lanes work in parking facilities. We also need to look at different geofences. Where do these things operate? Where are they allowed to operate? Where can they be left? And so on and so forth. And also, obviously, look at range issues to get it right. So we are basically testing the overall efficiency of the transportation system with these new modes available. Next, please. We are going to explain about how we model these. And Guglielmo will explain about the details. But before he kicks in, I will, next please, talk about the mode choice structure that we have implemented in the Abu Dhabi model. We have the car available segment of the population. We have now the autonomous vehicle available segment of the population, and obviously the no car available. So we do the demand mode choice model for all of these categories. This is an example of the autonomous vehicle available, but it's the same as the others. In the middle, we can see the alternative for MaaS that we have implemented. We have MaaS conventional, MaaS new. The Abu Dhabi Authority, the DMT, they wanted to check how the competition is between the conventional and the new forms. They control the conventional, and they want to be able to look at regulations and so on to understand the competition from the new modes. In the conventional, we have the street pickup, the pre-booked with apps and so on. For the MaaS new, we have Uber style, we have chariot ride-sharing style, and we even have car clubs and car sharing that we can model. For soft modes, we have shared e-micromobility, e-scooters and e-bikes. And all of these new modes, the MaaS and the new soft modes, they can also be modeled as access and egress to the public transport system. You can see that on the right, on the left, sorry. Next, please. When we do the mode choice model, obviously we need to estimate the travel costs, and we have to represent the supply and of the service and the demand for this service. For demand responsive modes, we have some additional challenges. We need to represent the route taken by these demand responsive modes. We don't know the route, so we have to find a way of representing it. We also need to estimate the access and waiting time for this new mode. Waiting and diversion times, that would be a function of the fleet size. We need to look at their optimal distribution over space and time to calculate a proper wait time. And we need to, well, the demand depends in turn on the fleets and vice versa. Next, please. We have developed a modeling process for making this happen. Just have to wait for the new slide. This process and even the methodology we have implemented is developed with the help of Dr. Pilar Williamson. We start off with the networks and the data. We go into the aggregate demand model. We do the destination and mode choice, and then we go and assign what we get to the network, go back into the demand model, and then after the first loop, we do the proxy demand responsive assignment. Then we have to check if we have fleet size enough to accommodate the demand. We check that. If we do not have fleet size enough, we have to go back up again, calculate the or adjust the level of service, and go into the demand model. And this loop goes on until we find a balance. So this is kind of the modeling process that we are using. At this stage, for the next slide, I will hand over to Guglielmo, my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Tor. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone. In the next few slides, basically, we are going to see how our demand responsive mode is implemented in the Abu Dhabi Steel model. And in particular, we're going to see the shared e-micromobility. First of all, by shared e-micromobility, we refer to the bike and scooter, of course, electric bike and electric scooter, that are pooled for multiple users. We consider two assumptions. The first one is that these vehicles are free-floating. This means that the user can drop the vehicle everywhere within a geofence area specified by the user. And then that there is only one usage per vehicle per hour, so per micro time period in the Abu Dhabi Steam model. These two assumptions give us the possibility to implement this shared e-mobility mode in the Abu Dhabi Steam model that is a strategic model. And the modeling process starts with the network cost extraction. And basically, at this stage, time and distance are extracted for e-bike and e-scooter. Then the geofence is applied in order to exclude the OD trips that are not within it. But at this step, it is possible to apply other different kind of restriction on the trips that can be considered for this mode, and they can be based on distance. They can be based only on the origin or only on the destinations, or a combination of both. And in the next slide, it is possible to see that these costs extracted in the previous steps are then used to calculate the generalized cost. As you can see, the generalized cost for shared e-micromobility depends on the in-vehicle time, so the time spent on the bike or on the scooter. The fare, that can be a combination of time, distance, flat fare, minimum, maximum fare, and then the working time. By working time, we mean the time to find an available unit, an available vehicle, and this attribute is very important, and we will see in a minute, because it gives us the possibility to implement this methodology. Once the generalized cost is calculated, then it is possible to go inside the model choice step, and after the model choice step, some trips are allocated to the shared e-micromobility. Basically, so far, the steps are the standard step that we use basically in a strategic model. The new step is the estimation of the suitability of the fleet size and the adjustment of the working size. At this point, basically, the model is checking if the fleet can satisfy the demand. In the next slide, we are seeing that to better represent the real condition, we do not consider a demand limitation, so a fixed number of trips that can be done using shared e-mobility. But we are using the working time to find the scooter, to find the bike, as a proxy of the availability of the fleet. And this working time is calculated in the way you can see on the slide. So the working time depends on a minimum working time, that basically it's the time to find the unit when the fleet is all available. Then it is possible to set up a maximum working time. And then you can see that it depends on the fleet ratio. The fleet ratio is a ratio between the number of trips and the fleet. In the Abu Dhabi Steam model, we consider the fleet different by region. So at this stage, this ratio is calculated considering all the trips for a specific region, over the fleet that the user defined for the region. In the function, you can also see that there are two parameters, A and B. Parameters basically represent the elasticity of the working time compared to the fleet ratio. And in the next slide, it is possible to see an example of these curves. And well, it's possible to see that when the fleet ratio increases, also the working time increases. How fleet ratio affect working time can be defined by these two parameters, A and B. And just to give you an idea how A and B parameters affect this function, in the next slide, we have fixed the B parameter and increased the A parameter. And it is possible to see that increasing A parameter, the fleet ratio starts affecting the working time earlier compared to the blue curves. In the same way, it is possible to see in the next slide how the B parameters affect the function. In this case, we fixed the A parameter, we increased the B parameters, and you can see that the fleet ratio starts affecting the working time later compared to the blue curve, but then that the steepness increases. Basically, this function and these two parameters can be calibrated considering in order to represent the turnover of the service, turnover of the mode, and data from a service operator can be used for this kind of calibration. Once the working time is adjusted with using this function, in the next slide, we can see that it is used again in the generalized cost for the next model iteration to update the generalized cost. This generalized cost then is used again in the model check step. After, since the general cost will be different, also the number of trips that the model check step allocates to this mode will be different. The working time is adjusted. It is used again in generalized cost, and this process is repeated until the convergence is reached. This methodology, once it is implemented for shared micromobility in a strategic model, give us the possibility to test different kind of scenarios. In the next slide, you can see that it's possible to consider changes in the fleet size that can be different by region, by sector, by zones, by OD pairs. It is possible to consider also different areas for the geofence or any other kind of restriction related to this mode. As I said before, the fares can be a combination of fare based on time, based on distance, flag fare, minimum, maximum fare. It is also possible to change the parameter that regulate the working time. So put basically the maximum and minimum working time, and with this methodology, it is also possible to use the model in a reverse way. So it is possible to calculate, to estimate the optimal fleet size given the fixed working time. So the model can estimate the fleet that is able to satisfy the demand. And of course, once you have the trips done with the shared micromobility, it is possible to assign it to the network, identify the flows, and evaluate scenarios. For example, introduction of bike lanes or scooter lanes on the network. In the next slide, you can see that this shared fleet methodology, or this demand responsive mode methodology, is considered in our example in the Abu Dhabi Steam model, not only for shared micromobility, but also for all the other demand responsive modes that we have considered. So, for example, of course, it will be different because there will be different elements that define this different mode. For example, we will consider when we consider Uber mode, we have to take into account also the relocation trips, because these relocation trips affect not only the network, but also the waiting time, since this trip will occupy a unit. So also the fleet ratio is calculated in a different way. In the same way, if you consider ride sharing, you have relocation trips, but also diversion trips. So these diversion trips will affect the congestion of the network, the waiting time, but also the in-vehicle time. So basically, this methodology has been applied to all the new demand responsive mode we have considered in the shared, in the Abu Dhabi Steam model. And I'll pass to Tor for the conclusion.
Thank you. And the conclusion is that the macro model can handle it. That's the main message. I started off saying that we talk a lot about ABMs these days, and we might think that we all have to move into activity-based modeling and agent-based modeling and so on. That might well be the way forward for the future, but in the meantime, for the next few years, for many, many cities, this will the case will be that they have four-step models, and it is possible to include these new modes and new services, both as modes in the mode choice structure, but also as access and egress to PT. Thank you.
Thank you, Tor and Guglielmo. And I would ask all the speakers to turn on your video, and it's time for some Q&A. And again, if you haven't already, please enter your questions in the Q&A tab. And we've got some, and I'll just get right into it. And our first question, it's directed to Peter from Hassan Hadi, and it has to do with the air taxis. And Hassan is interested if there's any empirical data available for this mode.
Yeah, Hassan, thank you for the question. Air taxi that's one of the challenges that I didn't mention. Actually, as each new mode, we don't have observed behavior or information about the observed behavior. So the only studies or only source of data that we can base our model setup on are all stated preference surveys, which are sort of hypothetical with all the disadvantages that we know, or assumptions. And our choice or our path that we choose in the studies is to more rely on assumptions than on the stated preference studies that can be biased by the, let's say, non-controlled environment in which the studies are made. So for air taxi, what we base the key underlying assumption is that it's just a faster conventional taxi mode, which has different travel times, different travel time reliability, meaning it's safer in terms of fixed travel time, and that it has different costs, and that there are costs related to the multimodalities, meaning the transfer of modes and the cost of the connecting modes. So the weight or the attitude of the passenger, one of the assumptions that we use, the attitude towards the new mode, is comparable to the attitude to the conventional mode. But we will be very happy to hear if you are aware of studies that we can base the attitude factor, meaning the alternative specific constant, or include variables related to the specific mode. We'll be very happy to hear that in our future studies.
Okay, got one other question on air taxis, and very quickly, Peter. Has there been any demand for analyzing the externalities of air taxis, for example, blights on nearby buildings and accidents?
That, as we work mostly for the operators, they don't deal very much with externalities. But the key externality that is being modeled, but not by us, but they are, let's say, I know that one of the clients is considering that, is the safety. And especially that the accident rate has to be extremely low, because the air taxi is operating in urban areas, and any accident can have very negative effects compared to accidents on roads.
Oh, thank you. I've got a question for Paul, and it's from Sraviti Catalio. Sorry for the pronunciation. And Paul, the concept of backcasting, how applicable is it in a developed city like London or Dubai?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it's, there's so much to consider in all of this, and I guess really is, what is this growth or development trying to be? Is it a place of residence? Is it a creation of jobs? How does it contribute to what's already there within the city fabric? What mobility infrastructure would it knit into? I talked about that debate of what comes first, land use or mobility, and there are examples of complete failures. I'd pick one: Canary Wharf in London. The company Canary Wharf went bust because nobody could get there after they built their the Canary Wharf Tower, and then they built the DLR, the light rail system, and the underground station extension. Suddenly, Canary Wharf is booming. It's so this relationship between land use and mobility is so important to understand how the two work together. I think trip length distribution is a good parameter to help measure the success of that, how far people are traveling collectively, what is the reach and accessibility of the new growth area, and how does that fit in the ethos of what you're trying to achieve. So that's one variable that or indicator of success that can be used. Lastly, just very quickly, the first case study I presented of the light touch technique, the network hierarchy, actually was in India, and they had a terrible land use balance to the point that they were creating in commute to this place of 800,000 people along one rail line, and it was just ridiculous, shall we say it like that, that they just did not consider the land use balance very well to make it a self-sustainable growth area. So yeah, lots to consider in that topic.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And a question from Sunal Hugio, and maybe I'll direct it to Tor, and Paul, you can also comment. In the Middle East, where there is a real problem of collecting reliable travel data, how you collect this data? You can perhaps not even interview 1% of the population, garbage in, garbage out. Can you talk to getting quality data?
Well, we had a presentation by Stephen Bennett from Abu Dhabi ITC earlier today, and he was talking about having 50 billion records of data. So I'm not buying that data is scarce all over the Middle East. I think for where we have our model implemented in Abu Dhabi, we don't have that problem. They have been addressing this issue for the last 5, 6, 7 years, and got all of the data available from various data sources. They have carried out surveys and so on, and they have a really, really good database. I know the situation is very different in other states, but it's about getting organized and collecting the data, and yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Did you have anything to follow up on?
Yeah, I mean, data is how you use this, isn't it? For new developments like the NEOM project, and this is what I was trying to say, I suppose, with the backcasting thing. So to use data as and use that as a trend for forecasting the future it can lead you down the predict and provide road. Obviously, for established places, large metropolitan cities, then to a large extent, trend is going to be followed by most of us. We do what we did before. But yeah, just for the NEOM perspective, following a trend-based approach, might not lead you to achieving the vision that you set out to achieve in the first place.
Thank you. Our next question is from Peter Davidson, and I'll point it to you, Guglielmo. The attractiveness of new modes will depend on the prices that are offered. How can you estimate prices of services that are not yet available? Particularly for mobility as a service, a wide range of prices seem possible.
Well, it depends, because in the model we have developed a methodology that gives the user the possibility to consider all of this kind of range of price. For example, it is possible to consider minimum fares, maximum fares. It is possible to consider fares based on the time and distances. Of course, the idea is to start, since this new mode is not implemented in the reality in that area, is to start with some example from other similar countries or already existing examples. But the idea is to give the user to set up also different scenarios where the user can make some sensitivity test, changing this kind of fare regulation system.
Okay, well, thank you. I will pose a question to Boleslav, and here's a kind of a general question from myself. We're all kind of model supporters here, but they're skeptics, and with so much uncertainty in the future, and given that many of these new technology modes currently don't exist, how do you convince those thinking about investing in new models to study new mobility and Hyperloop, and that the results will be credible and not just throwing darts at a dartboard?
I think Hyperloop is not that example where we can talk about credible, let's say, or similar terms, because it's not only about modeling, it's about the technology itself and the definition of this technology. Because to be able to model it, you need to actually shape it first. If we talk about air taxi, as I mentioned today, this is a helicopter effectively. We know what's going to be the takeoff landing time, we know what's going to be the route for it, what's the cruising speed, and how the helipad will look like. And what are the associated costs with it. With Hyperloop, it is not like that, because Hyperloop, like it is claimed that this technology may go on ground, above ground, underground, and even there are studies where it is considered to do it in the deep sea, because it's effectively a pipe. So in my understanding, what is the most important with modeling such kind of concepts is to identify where is that elasticity range and how you can put this type of a technology in competition with existing modes. And that is why some kind of a flexible setups for like dynamic fare models can be considered, so that you will have a consolidated set of assumptions for such a mode, and then you can run a range of different sensitivity and elasticity tests under different assumptions to come up with not, let's say, possible futures, like not with a probable future, but with all possible options there, because anyway, it's modeling of uncertainty. And this will formulate certain strategies where then we can focus and explore a bit more this or that direction. And I gave also certain examples with the use cases. One of them is like nationwide metro, another one is a regional commute on 300-400 kilometers. Completely different cases, completely different setups, and different benchmarks. So this is a result of elasticities that has to be done.
Okay, thanks for that answer. And I have a question from Tim Veach and to Guglielmo and Tor. Do you have a view on whether your algorithm to drive the fleet size in response to demand converges to a solution, and whether this solution is unique? Tor, Guglielmo.
Yeah, I can say that. First, I can say that this optimal fleet size, of course, also depends on how you set up your model choice step. Of course, basically, in this way, we have a base case where we consider no limit to the fleet size. This means to give the model choice the possibility to allocate all the trips that to this shared micromobility mode. And yes, it converges to a solution to the convergence, basically. But as I said before, it depends on how you consider the model choice step. Of course, in the model choice we have it is based on the utility, so it's calculate the utility to do the trip using shared micromobility without any or a minimum working time. So it is you can imagine like the work trip, for example. You don't have any restriction. It depends if you consider a sort of a congestion due to this bike or scooter flows, but technically it's yeah, in the base case, in the test we made we have a unique solution. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. A question for Paul. Is backcasting the new forecasting the closest approach to vision-based planning, and is it applicable to near futures as well as far futures?
It depends at the pace you want to move at, doesn't it? You've seen in the pandemic in the last year pop-up cycle lanes that just appeared overnight because they seemed like a good thing to do, and you could do them very quickly, and it actually showed how quickly you could do things if you put your mind to it. When I say you, I mean local governments and transport agencies and so on. So in that sense, if you're trying to achieve some kind of vision goal, and we've shown with the pandemic in these pop-up lanes and so on that you can do by almost trial and error some things. You know, maybe we'll start to see more of this taking place in our cities where the politicians are going to make quicker, faster, braver decisions that are more in tune with what they're trying to achieve in the bigger picture, just to see if it works or not. And you know, before the pandemic, it was really hard to do this kind of stuff because of the bureaucracy and the need to consult local people on what you're doing and so on. So, yeah, maybe like I say, humans are adaptable. So maybe there is a case to try some of these easier things out in the near future more quickly.
Well, thanks, Paul. We're running up on our 90-minute time slot, and I just want to wrap up. And first, I'd just like to thank our wonderful speakers, Paul, Peter, Boleslav, Tor, and Guglielmo. Thank you to the people who posted the questions and to the audience. And I hope you all found it interesting and rewarding as I did, and looking at how we model what we thought was just science fiction not so long ago, but will be reality sooner than we think. So with that, have a wonderful rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you, and goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye all.